the national media does not in general seem to be very high on the Seahawks team. What do you see when you look at the roster and the quarterback position and the coaching staff and all of it?
I actually think the roster is pretty decent. I think they're sort of, and I was with the Packers, and they sort of strike me as like the Packers in this way, where they've done a good job over the last few years of drafting solid players onto the roster. Now the question is, can some of those guys elevate to another level? And in Green Bay, it's, they have this group of receivers, like 5 or 6 of them, that they know can play, but can any of them be a top guy? Can Dontavian Wicks be a top guy? Can Jaden Reed be a top guy? Same thing here. I feel like, can Charles Cross looks to me like a guy who's got the potential to elevate into a top 5 left tackle. Can he become that? Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, showed he could be a number 1 guy, like the focal point of an offense last year, but can he really elevate and become a true difference maker? Can Witherspoon be one of the best corners in football? They've got all of these guys that are at or near the end of their rookie contracts, and there are going to be big decisions to come on all of them. And a lot of that's a result, I think, of the capital they got in the Russell Wilson trade, where I think getting all of that draft capital, I think, coincided with a little bit of a bounce back in how they were drafting and developing here. Mm-hmm. And so now where does that group go? Because I think they've got a lot of guys, a lot of young guys on the roster, Kenneth Walker too, like young guys who can play. Big decisions coming on them. Can those guys elevate and find another level?
Yeah, Derek Hall, Boye Mafe. Can they go from good to great, which is such a theme across all of the NFL, seemingly every single year. But, let's get back to the quarterback conversation. Who is Sam Darnold to Burt Breer?
I think if you're the Seahawks, and I've used this comparison with you guys before, but the Alex Smith in Kansas City thing, right? Like where Alex Smith was so valuable to Andy Reid and the Chiefs because they had the first pick that year. They trade for Alex Smith. They decide we don't feel great about the quarterbacks, which, by the way, they were exactly right on. That was the E.J. Manuel. Geno went in the second round that year. And that gave them a chance to compete in the here and now. But it also created a scenario where they didn't have to force it. Like they could just wait for the right opportunity to come along, and like whenever that quarterback that they saw as really that's the guy, then we can move aggressively and go and get him. And eventually it happened. It took 4 years to get there, but eventually they saw Mahomes, and I think a different light than a lot of other people saw Mahomes, and they strike, and the rest is history. I think that's sort of what you're looking at with Sam. You had that with Geno, I think, and now you reset that to some degree with Sam, and you hope that Sam can replicate what he was able to do last year in Minnesota, because I think that player is there, and I think especially with Clint Kubiak here, you have an idea, you have a blueprint for how to have him be that guy. Can he be the type of guy who is the best player on a Super Bowl champion? I don't know about that, but I think he can absolutely be a very competent playoff quarterback that, again, can maybe give you what the Chiefs had with Alex Smith pre-Mahomes.
I'm a little curious what you'll see when you go over there and watch practice, because one of the big challenges the Seahawks have is they do not have a lot of dynamic weaponry,
right?
Especially on the outside, and that sort of leads to your question about Jackson Smith and Jigba and whether he can make that leap. And I don't necessarily think that's a problem, as long as it's a complementary piece of your offense, as long as you're running the ball and using play action and helping those less dynamic playmaking guys kind of reach a potential and do what they do well rather than asking them to do something beyond that. If this team's in 3rd and 8 every series, I don't see how they can compete. They traded DK Metcalf and Geno Smith, and when you did that, I was really hoping that was going to lead to, okay, cool. They also went out and did what Minnesota or Chicago did on their offensive line. They didn't do that. So how do you get enough from the running game without having gone deep? I mean, Gray Zabel's a good pick, but like, is there enough there?
But the interior of their offensive line was a dumpster fire last year. We can call it what it was, right? Like,
was a dumpster fire for a decade,
and that's why you have to. That's why you go and you take a guard where you took him. Is
that enough?
And I think a lot of it, it's in a weird way, I think a lot of it relates to the defense and the terms you're playing games on, right? Like, so I think you got like backs that can get it done. I think you've got, quarterback who can move. And I think if you're able to play, I think having a really good defense is going to allow you to play games on your terms, right? Like to your point, if you're in 3rd and 8 a lot, well, sometimes that can be a function of like, are you behind, right? Like if you have a couple tough series to start a game, is it now is it 10-0? And if it's 10-0, do you have to play the game differently so you can't keep investing into the run game? So I think a lot of it's going to ride on the makeup of the team. And I think the one thing that you can hang your hat on here is Mike Macdonald has seen that formula in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
Clint Kubiak's dad was part of that in Baltimore, and a really, really successful iteration of it where, like, John Harbaugh, when he had Gary Kubiak, like, they didn't think they would. Gary Kubiak at the time was like, I'm done being a head coach. And then the Denver opportunity came along and it was too much for him to pass up. But, like, John Harbaugh thought so much of Gary Kubiak, like, this is going to be my coordinator for the next decade. And obviously it didn't work out. But we've seen, like, that offense within the context of the Ravens program. So there's a blueprint there. How quickly do you get Grace Abel up and running? What do the other 2 interior offensive line spots look like? Can Kenneth Walker stay? Like, all of that, like, I think plays into it, but the defense does too, because I think playing that type of game, it's a narrower path to victory than having a great quarterback.
Mm-hmm. I think this conversation just spurring a bunch of different thoughts with me. And honestly, I come back to the college game, Bert, and I think of so many programs that are not Ohio State or Alabama or Michigan with the resources. So what do we have to do? How do we disrupt it? If we don't have all that they have talent-wise and financially-wise, like, what do we have to do to disrupt? I wonder here if Mike Macdonald has to be as large and significant a disruptor as any coach competing against these guys.
Right, and I think what you did...
Because that was John's belief. John didn't say, let me find the next great offensive guy. Sean McVay wanted him to. Shanahan wanted him to. He interviewed all of them. But ultimately, he's like, if I'm actually going to beat these QBs, I need a disruptor to the market.
And that's, I mean, he's coming from a place that is that. Like, the Ravens have for a long time been like, okay, you're going to zig, we're going to zag. And they, I mean, at the beginning, it's not that way anymore, but at the beginning, they were more or less running like a service academy offense, you know, with Lamar. And the bet there was, okay, you're putting, you know, you're building to play against Patrick Mahomes in the AFC, and you're putting 215-pound linebackers on the field, and you're putting 190-pound safeties in the field. Yep. And you know what? We're coming right at you. And now they've got like a 260-pound robot at running back to do it, you know, in Baltimore. So I think that, you know, again, that's another thing when Mike Macdonald's roots were, okay, like, this is where the league is going. This is where our competition is going. We're going to go over there. And so we're going to be the most difficult team to play for everyone to play against, because what they're preparing for when they play us is totally different.
Why aren't more teams trying to emulate Baltimore? I guess they haven't won, you know, a lot of championships during that time.
Right.
But man, it sure feels like year in, year out, they're as consistent and as competitive of any team.
And their identity.
It's so clear.
Their identity. It's been the same for 25 years.
Yes.
You know what I mean? For the most part. I mean, it's dressed up differently, and there are differences, but who they are hasn't changed since Ray Lewis was a young player there. You know, so. I think doing that, it's as simple as it just boils down to ownership, I think, in a lot of cases. Yeah. And it takes a commitment to do that. And it takes like hey, we have to draft this way, and we have to sign players this way. And we may take a beating on shows like yours for a year or two, but once we get it up and running, it's going to work. Like, there aren't a lot of owners that have the patience and the foresight to see something like that through. It's easy to hire. You could hire somebody to do that, but it's easier just to hire hey, like, we're going to bring this guy to come and coach our quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that part of it
That's
is
what they did in Chicago.
Right.
And it may work, by the way. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but it's a very different approach.
Right. It's a different approach.
That's what Mike Mayock said. It still strikes me. We had Mike on before the draft, and just his life experience of being on the outside and being on the inside, and 25 teams just don't really have a chance because they don't have alignment.
Right.
That was his word again and again. Alignment, from ownership to presidency to GM to true alignment. And is there anybody better than the Ravens? I mean, the Chiefs maybe to some degree.
Right. I mean, and it's like Ozzie Newsome leaves and Eric DeCosta's ready to roll, and he's their guy, and Ozzie's still kind of there as a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs, there's no question what they're looking for in players. So you look at what they've done defensively, they don't get enough credit for it. You know, that they're drafting guys like George Karlaftis and Nick Bolton and Trent McDuffie, and it's just become this player development machine where it's we know exactly what they're looking for. Now they bring in Josh Simmons to play left tackle for him, a huge problem for them last year, and they can take that sort of risk because they're so established. Josh Simmons had maturity questions and injury questions coming in. If you're a bad team, you maybe can't take that chance.
Is he a Buckeye?
He's a Buckeye.
Well,
I'll give you a non-Buckeye. How about?
Interesting.
But how about this? How about this though?
Travion, is he a Buckeye? Let's see. Go through all the Buckeyes.
He better be watching G. Scott Jr. over at Patriots training camp. That's all I know.
His
dad's right outside here.
I was talking to G. Scott Sr. about that here a second ago. But it becomes an inherent advantage.
Philly's got to have some of that now too, right?
Philly. Well, that was the next example I was going to bring up was Jalen Carter. A lot of people are like, how did Jalen Carter make it to the 9th pick?
Because the Seahawks passed on him?
Because other teams couldn't bring him. You couldn't bring him in because he had the character issues were so serious with him. I mean, he was involved in that girl's death. And this, so there were such serious character things where it's if you aren't up and running, if you don't have an established program, then you can't swing on that.
So where are the Seahawks in this? Because Pete and John and I think Paul and on to Jody, I think you would have to include that from a winning standpoint in the last 15 to 20 years.
And knowing exactly what they were looking for.
In the early part of that, were they as aligned at the end of that? I don't know. I don't know if there was the same kind of alignment for the last couple of years.
Yeah, so I think it's with going from Paul Allen to Jody, obviously, I think that there was a lot of, I'd say there was just I don't know if you call it curiosity or discomfort, but I know there were those questions is she going to be more involved? Is she going to operate differently? So and that's probably settled a little bit because she's been around a little while now. And I still think it's to be determined with John and Mike. Let's see John get through a couple drafts of putting players on the roster. Let's see how Gray Zabel looks. Emmanwori, I think, is going to be really interesting because you've got I think a lot of people around here would look at him and say Cam Chancellor, but for Mike Macdonald, it's probably Kyle Hamilton, right? That's the model for what they want to do with him. So John was so dialed in on what Pete needed and what Pete wanted in players, and can you reset that? And I think it takes a couple years to really see what that looks like.
When you see him, by the way, in person, you will not think he does not look like Cam Chancellor. He is taller and leaner. No one looks like Cam Chancellor.
No, but Kyle Hamilton, I think.
Yeah, right? It's probably I've never seen him in person, but that's probably a much better comp. So it's interesting you bring up, and we're talking to Albert Breer, who's in town and in studio before he goes over to Seahawks practice later today. I could follow up on the Service Academy offense and whether or not that's something Jalen Milroe could run, but I want to stay with the alignment thing because I think we're going to talk to Mike Macdonald tomorrow, so maybe we'll ask him about some of this. I wonder how challenging that was for him last year, but not up, down. He came into a situation with Geno Smith and Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, 3 guys that are no longer here that were really the old guard. That was
dyed-in-the-wool Pete guys.
Those were Pete guys, and they learned the NFL the Pete way, and in Geno's case, maybe not, but was almost saved by him.
The way Geno talks about Pete, it's like his dad.
The other 2 guys, that's all they ever knew. Geno, it's honestly like he saved him from purgatory. And
Geno was talking to Pete during the season last year.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we talked about that. So if you're Mike Macdonald, you almost have to have come in last year, I would think, and kind of tried to mold yourself to work with these 3 guys who held a lot of sway, but had always done things a different way. He could be entirely freed up from that now to actually make this Mike Macdonald's team instead of the Pete Holdovers
team. And that's always tricky, I think, for a new coach that takes over a place that isn't necessarily broken. You know, like when you come in, it can be more difficult to take over a place where they've won than if they went 2-14.
Right.
Because you're coming in and you're saying like, okay, like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. We're going to change this. We're going to change that. If it doesn't work right away, like the players will be like, the way we did it before was working okay. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that can linger sometimes with certain guys, and you have to, and that can be a challenge if you are taking over a place that wasn't broken. And this place, I think you guys would agree, wasn't broken. No. You know, maybe you need the change, but it wasn't broken. So I do think that there's that piece of it where you're flushing some things out. And, you know, it's like one of the reasons why, you know, you look at what Washington did last year with Dan Quinn. Almost every player that they signed in free agency had background with someone on their staff. Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler came from Dallas with DQ. Austin Eckler was with Anthony Lynn with the Chargers. I mean, you can go right on down the list. Almost every single player they signed in free agency had some sort of background. And so now, like, I think you see a little bit of that now with Sam Darnold coming over. Well, he was with Clint Kubiak in San Francisco. You need some torchbearers, you know, for your program and for what you're trying to build, and maybe they're getting closer to that now.
I'm curious. You're going to be your 9th stop, you said, or 10th?
9th, yeah.
Your 9th. One thing that has struck us, and this week we've talked to a player every single day, and all of our shows have, and the afternoon guys, midday are all out there. And the one thing, almost to a man with all the interviews, is the word vulnerability. There's just a transparency with the players to be so much more vulnerable. We can talk about the difference in camp style and everything else from the old days, but there's just no question the guys are so much more open and willing to talk about, especially in this program. And I'm curious in the 8 other stops, if you get that sense, is that a league-wide
like vulnerability, like being able to just speak freely about
themselves, their path, their journey, their failures, their just their.
I think part of that, Brock, like might be a result of who's coming into the league. You know, I even thought about this. Like, this is like a crazy thing that hit me watching them and thinking about like how camp looks so different. Like some of these guys, like most of the league now, probably didn't have two-a-days at any level. Right, like they didn't have it in high school, like let alone not having it in the pros. Like it's gone everywhere now, you know. So it's a different world, and I do think NIL kind of plays into what you're talking about, where these guys are, where maybe 10 years ago they're coming from college, and there is that coach is the king, and I can't express I'm a foot soldier.
Yep.
In this emperor's palace.
But it's weird. You would think that with more empowerment, which is what you're speaking to, that you'd be a little bit more like, but there's more transparency. And I do wonder if that is a Mike Macdonald.
It might be, yeah.
I mean, that's how he operates. I mean, I think that was one of the first things that we said, finished the interview, first time, like off the air, like, whoa. This guy's pretty darn vulnerable.
Yeah,
like with what I know.
Like, I'm not good about that yet.
What I don't know
how to do that.
Yeah,
yet.
and maybe it's generational too, because he's younger than the three of us significantly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Really?
Oh yeah,
and more of them are going to be. By the way, that's about to be a theme.
Well, it was like you had McVay as like the outlier out there that was like way younger than he's like McVay. I think is 5 or 6 years younger than me, but he was the outlier.
Yeah.
Now he's not the outlier anymore. It's gonna the math's not going to get better for us.
No.
Hey, circle back here today. You leave us. You're going to head down there. You're going to watch them. What are 2 or 3 things that you have to see today? Breer,
Sam's the obvious one. Okay. You know, I mean, like I want to watch Sam and see how he's operating. And I think, I had this. I had this when I came here before. 3 or 4 years ago, I remember walking off the field with a coach, and the coach said to me, coaching Gino has made me reevaluate how I look at quarterbacks now, and it makes me wonder how many more guys there are out here like that got highly drafted, that played before they were ready, that got broken, that went and backed up somewhere, and by the way, 4 or 5 years later, if somebody gives them a chance, then they're a different player. I'm telling that story because I can remember sitting in my office on Christmas night 2 years ago, and the Ravens were blowing the Niners out. And Sam got in that game. And I don't know why I started paying attention, because the game's over. But it was like Sam led the team right down the field to like a garbage time touchdown. And I was like, holy crap. That looks like a different player. And I circled up with the Viking with Kevin and and with Wes Phillips and some of the guys in Minnesota. I said, did I see this right? And they're like, yeah, like, that was one of the main things. Like, we saw that once Kyle, we saw a little bit of it in Carolina, and then once Kyle got his hands on him, all of a sudden he started playing faster. So for me, like, that's a big one, is seeing him play fast and seeing whether or not, like, you can kind of see the rhythm to his game. Because I think, like, the issue with Sam when he was young, Adam Gase got him and tried to make him Peyton Manning. And Gase had his greatest success on it. That is not who he is. You have to take the mental load off. You have to get him playing fast. He's an athlete, you know? And so that's one thing I'm going to look for, is the rhythm and speed with which he plays.
Let me jump in just because we got some breaking news while you're sitting here. Jake Glazer reporting just a moment ago, and I'm sure you'll go talk about this more when you get over there. He says continuity in Seattle. The Seahawks have given John Schneider a 4-year extension, keeping their president of football operations and GM through the 2030 draft. This will take him through at least his 20th draft with the organization.
Jeez.
How about that?
That's continuity. That's continuity. Yeah. So, I mean,
that surprised you at all? Something you would have expected?
So it's a 4-year extension, which means he would have been up. So he's in a contract year. No, because I think if they didn't match him up with Mike Macdonald, so sometimes, when you hire a new coach and you've got the incumbent GM, what you'll do is you'll give the GM an extension so they have matching contracts, right? So, like, if it's, say you have 2 years left on your deal, the coach signs a 5-year deal, you give the GM
the coach doesn't have outsized
so there's not
power.
So there's not like some sort of, so I think that this is probably just the organization waiting a year, seeing how the two of those guys work together and saying, okay, like, now we'll go ahead and match them up.
So if Sam is storyline 1, is there anything even close? Is there another?
I mean, it's like I said, like, the outsized importance of the quarterback is part of it. But I think, like, seeing the way Mike Macdonald's defense, I'm really fascinated with Emmanwori, because that safety position and the defense with the Ravens. So if you go back, and Mike Macdonald learned from Wink Martindale. When Wink Martindale became the coordinator with the Ravens, they rebuilt their defense, and the key guy in rebuilding their defense was Eric Weddle. And it was Eric Weddle was the heady guy who, we're going to empower the players. And so the offense is doing so much to change, to give the quarterback latitude to change plays and use the whole play clock. We're going to empower. We're going to have a heady safety out there, and we're going to empower him. And that became Kyle Hamilton. So Weddle, Hamilton, and now, like, can Emmanwori be that guy for the Seahawks? I think watching their secondary in general is going to be interesting, because that, to me, that the secondary, guys like Woolen, like, the secondary is the key to how good the Ravens have been the last few years. So watching those guys, I think, is going to be really big. And then, like, I'm interested to see with the turnover at receiver. I just, like, what does Cooper Kupp have left? The Rams were. I think the reason they didn't trade him before the trade deadline last year was because, and they had talked to some teams about it, and other teams, because of his injury history and everything else, they weren't going to be able to get more than a day 3 pick for him. And at the time, they'd won a couple games in a row, so that played into it for sure. But the other part was, that's, like, really bad optics. If we're trading a guy in the middle of the season who's an icon for us, who caught the game winner in the Super Bowl, let's not do it now. And then they wind up moving on from him after the year. What does he have left? Because I think he could be great for Jackson in a lot of different ways, but can he still play? And can he stay healthy? Because obviously he's a warrior and has played through so much stuff, but there is a mileage question with him.
That's Albert Breer, and you can always read him at Monday Morning Quarterback, where he does just a phenomenal job keeping the legacy of that alive.